I'll just do a wave when we're live. And there we go.
Hello, everyone. So I can't see your face, but you see our faces, and welcome to the stream tonight. So what we have in mind is this is the first of these sessions that we'll have around getting hired and making a portfolio and finding a job that you love for the long term. I'm Jacqueline Fischier, and I'll be facilitating the conversation tonight. With me is Liesel Bester from IO. Liesel, do you want to quickly intro yourself?
Yeah, I'll be quick. Hi, everyone. My name is Liesel. I'm from a company called IO, IO Digital Pty Limited, but we just call it IO. It's io.co.za if you want to go have a quick look. We're also one of the sponsors of ZAPD, along with Code Capsules. And we are predominantly early stage product builders. So yeah, we're always in the realm of learning more about product, and also I'm also here today to learn because we also employ product designers. So I look forward to the talk. Thanks. Who's next?
Amazing. Thanks, Liesel. So I've had the great fortune to work with a lot of really amazing designers, and I've also had the fortune to work with amazing design leaders. As a matter of fact, both Tracy and Meena has been my boss at some point in my career, and that's part of the reason they're here is because they were just such phenomenal people to work with, and I learned so much from both of them. And in particular, the hiring cycle, like a lot of the administration and the really, really hard stuff with Meena when we grew a team very quickly. And then Tracy, everyone knows I have a huge leadership thing about her and how amazing she is, her team, and how she supports them. I'll let them introduce themselves and their job titles and stuff. And then of course we have Marcel. I've also had the really amazing pleasure of working with him many years ago, and we've always stayed in touch. And for those of you who don't know him, he's an amazing leader in the design space as well, growing teams, and as the rest of us, just growing the community and really wanting to get people to solve super hard problems while having fun. Marcel, do you want to talk, give us a quick intro?
Sure. Thanks, Jax. Well, thanks for the warm welcome and the very kind words. Yeah, it's true. We go back way back, Jax, back in the day when things like Agile and DevOps and those things were very new in the corporate space. I'm talking 2013, 2014, when we joined a certain project at a certain blue bank. And back then it was in the consultancy space. So I started a little design team for Accenture, for a consultancy firm. And that was really an amazing adventure. The premise of that offering was built around and focused around service design. So that was also very new in the space. And I took the leap from agency world and digital agency to join the consultancy firm and build Fjord over 7 years. And then at the end of those 7 years, I took the leap into corporate, and I'm now leading the design team for Sanlam. So I'm 100% corporate now, and I don't have to respond to RFPs and things anymore, but I'm the other end of the spectrum. Also building a team, it's still the same thing, I think, when it comes to building teams. But that's the thing. One of the things I enjoy is building, as they call in consultancy speak, highly functioning teams. And yeah, looking forward to the conversation. Hi, everybody.
Amazing. Trace, do you want to go next?
Sure, okay. Thanks very much for having me here. And also, thanks for all those lovely words, Jax. I think you might be sucking up a little, but anyway.
I don't need to.
Yeah, so a little about me. I'm at the Blue Bank that was mentioned, and have been there now nearly 10 years this year, amazingly. Actually started as a consultant, interestingly, and I was going to do a short little gig with them. It was going to be a 3-month contract, and after 2 years, they converted me to perm, and I am still here doing my thing. There's been a lot of changes over all that time. Lots of things that have changed. I mean, even Marcel saying like bringing in agile was a new thing that we actually did there and figured out how does that work, how does design fit into it, etc. But as part of all of that was also building up a design team and trying to get it into all the different parts of the bank, and just trying to get focused on being a little good team together, doing good work, even though there's a lot of chaos all around us all the time in corporate. But yeah, so I still keep doing that because there's need for it. It's never going to go away.
Amazing. Meena?
Thanks, Jax, and good evening, everyone. Thank you for the warm welcome and the kind words, like Marcel and Tracy have mentioned. My career in design particularly started when I was doing the core banking transformation program at the Blue Bank, and that's where I got exposed to design. But I was then asked to set up the design capability for personal and business banking. But I've got to put it out there, although Jax reported into me, she was more my boss than I was hers, because I learned a lot from her, and now I'm learning lots from Tracy. So it's really great to be part of this capability of this fraternity that is so willing to learn. And I'm happy to be here today to share my learnings from a recruitment hiring perspective. It's not been easy, especially when Jax and I were setting up this team. There was lots of history of individuals that were in the team without much experience, without much technical knowledge. And we've actually come a long way to say we've now got them certified, trained, skilled, and knowledgeable on the job. So firstly, also thank you to Jax for partnering with me on that journey. Thanks.
Thanks, Meena. Now I feel like it's some sort of conspiracy. I'm like, hey, everyone said nice things about me too. It's just a coincidence, guys. I think we just grafted really, really hard. And I think anyone listening to us who's worked in design, you know exactly what we're talking about. We want to make a difference, and it takes time, right? So I think what I have in my mind is the mental model of being hired. So I don't know what kind of people are listening tonight, but I do have idea where people go, oh, I need a job. Interview. No, I need a job. Crap, I need a portfolio. I need an interview, and I get an offer letter. So I think those are the 3 or 4 things people have in their heads when they are looking for a job. So I really wanted to invite very experienced hiring managers with different backgrounds for them to give us a short overview of how hiring happens in the space that they're in. Meena, do you want to go first?
Sure. So from a Standard Bank perspective, design has been fragmented in various pockets of the various segments that we have within Standard Bank. So it's been happening in its silos. That's number one. So a person that may be employed by CIB may have been rejected by the retail bank, which is not ideal. So firstly, it's the recruitment. It's first the advertising. From there, we go into a huge list of candidates that send through their CVs. But how do you go about shortlisting? And what we found is that recruitment did that for us, which is not ideal because, firstly, they don't understand our capability. They don't understand that we are creatives. The portfolio is not going to look like the standard CV template that they're looking for, and they just don't know what to look at. So from there, we've taken that upon us from a design operations perspective to say, let us shortlist. Let us also look at what are the we call it speed dating sessions, because it's speed dating for us, because we're meeting all these candidates to get a feel of how they are, who they are personally, what's their achievements, what's their goal orientation, etc., to see if they'll be a fit. And then we go into a round of intensive interviews. There's usually around two rounds of that. The first is more around the technical knowledge and understanding and seeing whether you have the technical ability matched to the job. And then the next is around the second interview, if you are successful, is around as you may called it, the actual artifacts of work that you've done previously. Or it could be a case study that we provide you where you will come back and present to us on that specific problem statement we provide you with. If you're successful for that, we then put through the offer letters. There's numerous psychometric testing, assessments that need to be done from a legal perspective and a bank perspective that needs to be done before a person is actually hired. I just want to say that our recruitment process can take from 4 to 6 months, 4 to 8 months. Industry standards, when I look at DHI stats, it says 19 days for designers globally. So we're nowhere near that. And there's lots of work that we need to do in terms of getting the process right. So yeah, that's my short spiel on the process.
Amazing. Thanks, Meena. It's, that's exactly kind of insight I was hoping someone would share. It's just how, I know it's hard looking for a job, truly. The people on the other side are also trying to shorten things and make it better. Tracy, I think because you and Meena are currently working at the same company, maybe you can share some of the things that you found particularly painful in the process that you have since changed, and maybe talk us a bit through how you review CVs and portfolios.
Sure. So, yeah, I'll actually just add to Meena's process, because I actually add in a few other things there as well, just because I always like to be different, And so I sometimes have additional sessions once I think we're a fit, particularly if a product designer is going to be embedded in a specific feature team, an agile feature team. I sometimes do almost personality fits, if you will. I bring in non-designers to meet with them to see if there will be a team fit, to see if that's going to be something that's also a criteria for me. And then depending on the level of designer that I'm looking at, we also sometimes give them an actual physical test to do. So not just a portfolio walkthrough, but an actual little, whiteboard sketch. In the old days, when we actually were still back in an office all the time, we used to do that dreaded, well, some people think it's dreaded, other people don't, but the whiteboard sketching thing. We would pose a little scenario and we would ask the designer to just kind of draw up a couple of screens. And we kept it quite simple, but it was essentially not to try and put someone on the spot and scare them, but to understand if they would kind of ask us questions, if they would probe the scenario we'd given them, and what sort of things they would think about first. And a lot of the time, that is actually a really easy way to understand if someone knows their craft. And as opposed to going, how many years have you been in this job? Which is quite a dry way of doing it. And we tried to make that process quite sort of lighthearted and fun, and so that people weren't scared about it. But I know that there's a lot of people out there that think that that's not the most effective way to necessarily judge someone. I just use it as one input into the whole process of all the things we've, Meena's already said, and that I've said around meeting, seeing how you work, seeing your work, seeing how you present yourself, what your CV looks like, what your portfolio looks like, etc. One of the things that was very strange that our recruiters didn't understand from me right in the beginning was that I always wanted to see the original CV, particularly if I'm hiring a product designer who has to use UI skills, or if they are an actual UI designer, because a lot of the time, the way that you're putting your CV together is indicative of how you think about information, how you're presenting yourself. It's my first glimpse of your capability. How are you taking that data? How are you putting it together, and how are you showing it to me? Is it easy to read? Is it easy to follow? Is it, like super long and boring? I almost see it as like the cover letter, if you will. So I always used to say to the recruiters, please, if it's coming from another company or whatever, please don't like put it with your logo or anything weird, and don't strip it out and send me a Word document. Like, I want to know what the designer gave me. And I do find that that's quite a helpful thing. And I still have to tell HR guys, please, the original one, or send me the link to where it is on a website or something like that, Yeah. I don't know if anyone else does that. Marcel, do you do something like that?
That's an excellent tip. I'm making notes here, Tracy. I think that's an excellent idea, and I'll maybe ask for that in the future. But I think for me, it's to get the business to understand what you're looking for is perhaps the first hurdle. And I found that at Accenture, and I'm finding it again at Sanlam, and it's an educational process internally to work with HR and the recruiters to firstly define the roles. And believe it or not, there are some large corporates out there that don't have roles defined within design properly yet. So it's getting through that thing, and then in identifying candidates, especially when I was at Accenture, we had to hire some service designers, and back then, nobody had service designer on their CV. And I still believe that designers can come from anywhere and with pretty much any background. And depending where you fit in the spectrum, you can be further upstream and be really good at research, and that takes a different mindset as to someone that's really technical and detail orientated and loves getting into the solution, and how that's rolled out or spec'd for the devs, and loves working with devs. So and two CVs can sit in front of you, and they can look pretty much the same to a recruiter or to an HR person, and even to me. And then sometimes, like you say, Trace, sometimes you only really get to know the person when you start interrogating in real time where their skill sets are and where do they naturally kind of gravitate towards, and where maybe the gaps are. So it's an interesting process from the get-go in terms of articulating and advocating what you're looking for, and getting people on your side, and being able to talk the same language right up to the point where you're getting to know someone on sometimes a very short little time frame. Like sometimes the intro session is like the recruiter or the HR person sets up a half an hour call, and I've never found that half an hour is enough. Never. Like 45 minutes is where it starts getting to sufficient time to getting to know someone. And then the meetings, I think, two is a good one. We also have a technical meeting. We also do psychometric testing. And what's interesting about that is that the business would come back to you and say, well, this person didn't perform well in their numeracy or literacy scores. Now, I don't know about you, but I've found that designers like a lot of them struggle with spelling. Okay. And I don't know what that is, but I think it's actually got something to do with the way the brain works. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I've found many designers that really struggle to spell, but are excellent systemic thinkers and abstract thinkers. So, so the psychometric test isn't always for me, a measure to go on. It's a good indicator, but it's not necessarily always the be all and end all. And they always tell us that as well. But it is something to be done. So the technical interviews, and I think the psychometric testing can be a bit intimidating for people. When they look at those interviews, they can come across very cold. The technical interview is run by the HR person, and that lady in particular is very formal in the way it's presented and the way the interview is done. It's literally just ticking the boxes. What you experience in this area, what you experience in that area. Tell me about your tenure here and what you did there. And it doesn't really get behind the technical stuff, and then we got the personal interview with the team, and I tried to bring other team members in there. And I agree with you, Tracy, to get other people from a multifunctional or cross-functional team to sit with the designer is an important one, because ultimately it's also a cultural fit, and knowing that that person would fit with the style in which we do work and conduct work. And different organizations have different cultural makeups and DNA, and that's a big part of the puzzle. Did I mention assessments? We do assessments too, and I like people to talk to their assessments and explain. I like the thinking part of it. I like to understand the thinking part. I don't like to just look at portfolios. I want to understand how designers solve and think about things and make sense of problem spaces, or and unpack that. So that's where you really get to know the craft and the thing, the abilities.
Yeah, definitely. If I can add to that, I mean, seeing a portfolio is very helpful, in the beginning, to go, okay, yes, they're saying they can do X. I'm seeing evidence of X. There's a match. Cool. We know we're not going down the wrong path, but there's much more value in it when I can sit with someone and say, okay, well, tell me why you did this, and tell me how it ended up here, and explain what happened with this thing, so that I, to your point, Marcel, actually understand how the thinking was around it and how the person got to where they were. Because seeing a beautiful picture at the end of it, or seeing 2 or 3 screens, like a wireframe and then a finished one, it's lovely, but it doesn't tell me much. Yes. Right? So so tip for designers, you need to be able to talk to your work, talk through how you got to where you got to, why you got to, the challenges you had in it. That's very interesting for me, because what were they? There will always be challenges. So how did you get around them? How many times did you have to change it? How frustrating was that for you, and how did you handle it? Like, those are the things you need to know how to talk about.
Yeah. If I can add something, sorry, I'm going off here on a tangent, but if I can add something, I think what for me is interesting also is how they solve with other people, because I've sat in interviews and had people actually say, well, to the effect of, well, we just kind of like told them what they wanted to hear, and then we did what we wanted anyway. And that's not great. You don't want that kind of response. You want people that can work with others, and even if the other is a business owner or a business analyst or a technical person, you want to hear from them and get a sense of assurance that they can work with others and other-minded people. And as a designer, you should be able to navigate those potential schisms and the way people think about things, and amicably solve with everybody represented in that solution.
Okay. I'll ask some further questions on the process in a bit. I just wanted to check from Liesel if she has any questions, because I think if we talk about corporates and hiring there, what I've seen since I've moved to Cape Town, I know that there's like a lot of startups here. So Liesel, any questions that you want to pose to Meena or Marcel, or anything you want to add?
I kind of just want to, at this point, add on to, I think, Tracy, you said that when you're dealing with recruiters, you want to see the original CV. We take it a little bit further in that we want to have basically all the communication from when the recruiter thinks it's a possibility, because we want to see how the person answers their emails. How long does it take them to answer an email? How do they answer their emails? When you set up a meeting with them, are they on time? Like, those are all the little things that that sits around the CV. It's just sort of how the person conducts themselves. And so we try and take, I don't think recruiters like it a lot, but we try and take a lot of the ownership away from them, because they are stuff that we just can't not know until a later stage. We do very similar in terms, so we've got an initial culture value fit that we do. I think you just know very quickly, 10 minutes into a conversation, if it's going to be a fit or not. So we don't pull anybody that's got milestones and deliverables in until we've done a culture value fit. It just saves time. And then we do a second interview with a cross-functional team, similar to what you do. And then we do technical assessments as well. But yeah, I wanted to chip in earlier and say, yeah, that the recruitment is a difficult thing, because my phone, the moment I post a job, like I'm going to say 2 minutes after, my phone starts ringing. And it is just recruiters trying to recruit for that position for you. And all of them say the same thing. I don't want to diss recruiters here, but maybe if some of them are listening, they all say that they understand the role, but very quickly, sometimes into the process, you can tell that they don't understand your culture, they don't understand your values and your principles, and they are not matching you well. Yeah, bit of a pain point, but it's that one thing that you love to hate or hate to love. It's there's value to it, and there's the right time for it, but it's also it's a complex process to manage.
Yeah, I had a recruiter contact me on LinkedIn today, and this person said, "Well, there's a role for a service designer available somewhere, and am I interested?" And if he read my CV, he would know that I'm no longer a service designer, and I haven't been for probably 7 years. So it just shows they don't. A lot of them don't look at the candidates properly, and you know, when they're speaking to you as someone that's looking for a potential person, it doesn't always.
I've sometimes wondered about it, because, you know, like, I mean, UX design as a concept is actually, we're still actually infants. I mean, I know we've been going 15 years or something, but it's really not that long. And you mentioned, Marcel, and we actually know, Meena and I know as well, like, job architectures and job descriptions are not set in stone. And because we keep reinventing ourselves, because we're designers, you know, new things come in. I mean, like 5 years ago, service design was like, hardly anyone knew what it was, right? It was happening, but like you didn't even, like you said, you don't see that on CVs. So it's like, we've also got to be we've got to be wary that the HR guys and the recruiters are not always going to be up to speed with that. This is not their industry. If we can't get a handle of it most of the time, we can't really expect them to know a lot. But I have also had that experience where it feels like they take a couple of keywords like UX and product design and service design, and they just rather sort of like find on the CV, you know, like a control F, they pick it up, and if the 3 words match, they go, oh, this is a match of a CV, and it could be completely not even in the same world. I've got some very strange CVs in the past for things where you're like, this is not even close to a designer. Like, how did this handle? Yeah. But
I always feel like CV scanning is actually a very particular, you must have had like a certain amount of CVs come past your eyes to build up a certain, it's never something that I would leave to a junior person to go and do for me, or a person who doesn't know enough. I would rather work until 1 o'clock at night reviewing those CVs instead of giving it to the wrong person, because they are literally gold that can slip through your fingers. But I feel like just because of the amount of CVs I had to review, there are certain things that you can spot immediately. And you would put on a short list, but a recruiter or somebody else might not.
And can I just add on, from a Standard Bank perspective, we've also found that lots of good candidates have slipped through recruitment, the recruitment team. And until we got involved and started shortlisting for ourselves, we would have missed these individuals. But another key point that I want to add to the table is keeping a repository. Because once you keep that repository, you have access, and the entire design community in the bank then has access to it. And there's lots of good candidates that we have not been successful with due to timelines, right? The lengthy process. But it's how do we keep them on our radar so that if we do have a vacancy, we know we can reach out. And it also speaks to the people that have left us. How do we create that alumni of Standard Bank designers so that we can bring them back when they're ready to come back? There's huge learnings from these processes.
Yeah, when I was at Accenture and I was building the Fjord team, I was given a recruiter license on LinkedIn, which was amazing because I could actually manage my candidates, and I built a whole database, a little book of contacts on LinkedIn, and it was amazing and very powerful. And I could go through that list time and time again, look at communications or chats that I've had with candidates in the past, and go back to them and say, "How's things going now? Do you think you're ready for a move?" And then at one stage, without me knowing, HR just went and canceled that license, and I lost that whole little book with all the contacts that I built up basically over 5 years. I felt like I could murder someone. I was so angry. I was like,
Not cool.
it was literally my little book with everyone in it that I've been chatting to, and long histories of building those relationships, and never got that back. But yeah, building that little book of and managing and tending to it. It's like a garden. You tend to that on a regular basis, because you never know when you might call on someone, and sometimes timing is everything. Or that's the one thing I've found, right? So you and it happened again of late. Speaking to someone a year ago, they weren't ready, and it wasn't just not the right circumstances, and we had a conversation a few months ago, and a month later this person's joined the team and super happy, and A4 away. So it helps to have that backlog or little book that you can revisit every now and again and just check in and see how people are doing.
There's something else
That's
that
yeah.
sorry,
Go ahead,
Jack,
Meena.
go ahead. I just wanted to touch on, we spoke about the assessments, we spoke about the portfolios, but I just wanted to touch on the fact that there's different levels of designers, and the approach may be slightly different for junior designers versus senior designers. And I thought if I could just articulate that a bit. From a senior designer perspective, we're very much looking for people that are strategic, that can understand interdependencies between programs, and really be the voice of client to the multidisciplinary squad. So we usually get the multidisciplinary teams to be part of that interview process, that portfolio review, and the case study. And I think for a senior designer, that case study where they actually get a chance to take a real problem that the team is facing today and present it back with a design solution really gives you a view of whether the designer truly understands their role in a multidisciplinary squad. Then the fact that we also bring in junior designers, and I think they are critical for us, especially to build our pipeline, because we want to build the junior designers into senior designers in the company and even outside of the company. And when we look for those individuals, it's people that we feel that are collaborative, that wanna work in a multidisciplinary team, but that also understand the design thinking process, and that they then fit the culture of Standard Bank. So I just wanted to highlight the difference or the differentiation between the junior and the senior. Thanks.
That's awesome, Meena. I wanted to direct the conversation in a way like what are the differences? So Marcel, junior, senior, practice lead. Talk to me about how you see the world there.
Can I maybe just jump in quickly? So there's actually a ton of questions that's been coming through right out of the gate. I don't know if you guys maybe want to get start. Otherwise, it's going to pile up. So we might want to start working through them. Can I just throw them on the screen here?
Yeah, that would be awesome.
Yeah, like Liesel, Jax, I'm happy for you guys to also speak to it. So there's one that a couple of people said, and which is basically along the lines of, so someone who's been in a different industry, like in this case architectural design for 12 years, busy transitioning into UX, done several interaction design foundation, I assume, courses to get theoretical knowledge. What advice do you have to go further? And I'm also super curious to kind of hear everyone's response to this. So yeah, whoever's brave enough to take this one first.
That's a very popular question that comes up, is architecture going into UX? You see it all the time.
And they make really good designers. I have a lot of theories on that, but yeah.
Sorry, Marcel, you go.
Yeah, I'm going to say something very boring, but I would say...
Okay, him for last.
beyond the courses, I would say just getting practical experience and seeing where you can actually get a foot in the door. If you're a part of an existing organization, say to them, look, let me join a team that's busy with landing a feature. Let me work next to an actual IXD person and get hands-on experience. And I think the more you can do that, the more confident you'll get in applying the theory. Because the theory is one thing, but I think the one thing about design that really rings true is that the more you do it, the better. Like I suppose most things, the more you do it, the better you get at it. But the more confident you get in recognizing patterns, in doing synthesis, in moving quickly to a problem space into a solution space. The brain just works that way, and if you train it enough, you start getting the miles on board, and the muscle memory starts kicking in. But that's how you learn. Also, it's where you make mistakes is in the real world, and that's the thing. You got to get your hands dirty and start tackling real problems and real challenges, and solve solutions within those cross-functional teams and next to another IXD, or to start solving. And the more you can do that, and start chalking up some notches. I don't know what other analogies I can use here, but I'm close to using a sporting analogy. That's where you want to go next.
Anything from you, Trace?
No, I think I would totally agree with what Marcel is saying. It's about getting into the work in any way that you can. So, I mean, I've had a similar question before from students that are, they kind of, and I think there might be in a question in the chat actually as well about like how important is a portfolio for a junior. I think the thing is, same as portfolio and experience, when you're a junior, you don't have that much, but there's nothing stopping you from deciding to go and redesign an app, right? Like if you don't have access to someone to work with, there's nothing to say you can't take the theory that you've learned and start playing around and saying, okay, well, here's this app, I think I could do it better. Make up a problem you're going to solve and then try and design to solve it, and start putting that theory in practice. That's the best way to actually hands-on learn. And then you've got something to talk about. And then you can actually start to get into the nitty-gritties of what design is. But yeah, definitely just start designing.
I want to caution a little bit, like just a bit of a caution there to what you said, Tracy. Is what I've found is that people start, and I have found guys that have started creating their own prototypes and solutioning and just picking something which is great. But then I think at some point you need to get input and put it in front of real users. So that's important, and find out
agreed.
where the challenges are. Because the risk is designing in isolation, and of course coming up with solutions that aren't validated. So if you're truly into design, then you're gonna be willing to and eager to get your work out there in front of people and iterate and pivot and even start from scratch if need be. And those things is the experiences that you need and the stuff that you actually should be putting in your portfolio, the learnings and where you failed and improved or iterated.
Absolutely, yeah.
Meena, anything from you?
I was absolutely agree with both Marcel and Tracy. I think the immersion into the work is critical. I do also think that there's some sort of networking in terms of the design community to give you the exposure that you require and the practical experience. That's my contribution. Thanks.
Thank you. I also am happy you brought up the volunteering, being part of a community, getting to know people in the field. That's a super useful thing to do. And then just to touch on what Marcel and Tracy was talking about. So I think you need to think about whatever you're designing should fit the goal that you have for your career. So if you graphic design moving UI design, then redesigning a UI or an app is a-okay. If you're a architect and trying to move into IXDA, then I'm going to expect some research skills from you. I'm going to expect conceptual to detailed design, those kind of things. So just when you do that, apply the problem space to what you're solving. And that should really help you. Awesome. Skulk, I hope we answered your question. You can reach out to me on LinkedIn. I've got a career framework that help people like you move into design. Skulk, any other questions?
Yeah, there's actually, like, just to add to that, like, there's actually a recording of that specific career framework online as well. So maybe you can't plug it yourself, Jax, but I'm happy to plug it. So yeah, you can just search for Jacqueline Forshia design framework. You'll find that it's great. I actually recommended it to some students today. Okay. Yeah. I also just want to add. So my background is, so I also, like, I'm in the world of product design. Tend to be more on the programming side though, but I also teach quite a bit in the world of development, but also product design. And so a lot of these questions for me are like, I find it also these discussions really interesting because I would love to get your thoughts on like the state of design education, but like I don't know if we even want to go there, and whether you think it's as bad as I think it is as someone who's actually in the world of education. Because like all those things that you just listed now is actually the opposite of what people usually get taught. They get taught to just go build a prototype on your own in your room alone, hand it in 3 months, and then get a random mark based on someone's impression about it. But anyway, I don't want to go there. And next question, I think this is also a good one, is I would like to know from panelists their approach to individuals with freelance versus solo agency background only. So I assume the question here is around someone that doesn't have much experience working in an embedded team on a product at like that scale or that timeline, who's mainly had experience just working on stuff like doing it fixed timeline, getting it out, starting on a new project. This is something that I kind of see a bit of a split usually as well. So I'm curious what your takes are in terms of whether you take that into consideration when you're hiring.
I can go. Oh, Marcel, do you want to go?
No, you first.
Okay, so we've had experience with this particular case study where we've had individuals, they've had a agency background coming through for interviews. It is a big transition, that's number one. But what we look for is this person adaptable to the frameworks that we use within the design fraternity at the bank? And do we see them able to adjust to that? And another key pointer that we look for is collaboration, because the design community does not work in silo. We work in a multidisciplinary team. We are part of a project. from the start. We are there from the UX research, from defining what the problem is. We are just not designers of screens or graphics and so forth. So those becomes critical things that we look for in an interview. And I must say, we have placed individuals with pure solo agency backgrounds, and they have been successful, really successful. And what I like is that they bring a different view to the table in how can we solve problems. And that fresh view, the diversity in their thinking comes out very strongly. Marcel, I'll hand over back to you.
Yeah, thanks. I think I agree with you in saying that the transition can sometimes be difficult, but I think it's a double-edged sword. If you work in a freelance solo agency space, typically you expected to do everything and across the board. And so that can be a good and sometimes to your detriment. So I think if you're a go-getter and you can run with something, in many instances it's to your advantage. But yeah, I agree. In a multi-functional or cross-functional team, collaboration is critical. And then sometimes some of those behaviors need to adjust, or there's some things that need to be unlearned, I think, when coming into a large corporate. But if the intent is there to really do good work, and there's a natural inclination to reach out, ask questions, and learn, and you know, as any good designer, again, that those should be innate traits, then the person, you know, should already be in a positive footing. What I have found in the past is, and this is not just design, it's any space, is when someone has been used to doing things on their own or on their own terms, it sometimes, I'm not saying all every time, but in some instances, it's difficult for that person to take input or take correction or deal with situations where it's not in their control. And if we're honest, like the corporate space and the stuff that we do, a lot of things aren't necessarily in your control. And then it's about solving within those challenges or within those restrictions. But I mean, there's been, you know, way more cases in terms of my experience where people have made the transition successfully and with the right approach to integrating into a larger team or more complex environment. It certainly is possible. I think it's just about the approach.
Liesel, I think you can also add to this as someone who's not necessarily, IO isn't an agency per se, but you guys do have clients. So I'd be curious what your experience has been with the flip side, where it's like someone who's worked in an embedded team for a very long time, or only worked with corporates, coming into a space where you're actually servicing like an external client. Like, what has that experience been like?
I made a bit of a face now when you said it. Not specific to it. I just if I can just speak to coming from corporate into a smaller organization like ours, that's where people struggle a lot, because we work outside the confines of a role, and you can't, or you don't necessarily have the luxury of saying, no, it's not within my job spec. And we're also, there's levels of collaboration, I guess. So it's a harder transition where I think somebody is trying to say it in a way that it doesn't sound horrible or negative. It's not what I mean, but I feel in a corporate you have a very specific place. In a company like ours, it's not that. We encourage people to go outside of that, but that is very difficult. And it all comes back to just learned behavior for me. It's not that the person can't do it. They just have to unlearn. That we have to give them time to unlearn and give them the feedback that they need to be able to unlearn those behaviors and learn new ones. Because in a corporate, I would assume you're not always allowed to take those steps or move into a realm where you weren't invited to go there. So it's just a different, it really just boils down to habits for me, and helping the person transition through those habits. It's not undoable. And then there's other positive things to gain from it as well, so it's two sides to a coin. But yes, it is sometimes difficult and hard.
I want
That's
to add to that,
interesting.
Liesl, because I've
Right.
been in different spaces, from pre-seed funding to Series B funding to corporates. And I think what you said is true in a lot of cases from the outside. But I think what's really valuable for people who's moving into new roles to consider is that if you work in a digital transformation project, like a lot of what I think Marcel is dealing with is really bringing a bigger team in spaces where there hasn't been designers before. Marcel, you can comment afterwards. It's a big assumption on my side, but what Liesl was just saying is super valuable with those initial people joining. So I think it's also reading how many people you are serving, because if you have 1 million active users a month versus starting a startup, the way you approach things is also slightly different. So I'm really happy that this conversation moved in that direction, because I think it's really valuable looking at a role to start reading the situation as well, where if it's a digital transformation project, there might be a lot of really interesting things for you. If you're a UX writer, then you might want to start with a startup, but you can only really work there if you're a freelancer. Only if you join a more like a longer living team can you join as a writer. So just keep those things in mind, and I think it's really valuable that we've opened up that conversation. Go ahead, Marcel.
Yeah, I think it was very interesting to hear Liesl say or flip it on its head, because the opposite is also true. Any transition from big to small or vice versa is true. And I think you're right, Jax. You need to consider the environment and the kind of organization and the kind of problems that they're solving typically. The one realization that I had coming to Sanlam was that it's a very large and I think the biggest financial services institution in Africa, but it's very difficult to compare it to something like Standard Bank, because it's just simply not the same. It's not the same thing. It's not a retail or everyday banking environment. So that means that the amount of transactions happening on a daily basis is not the same, which means that perhaps the same urgency in terms of getting your transactional channels operating in an efficient and optimum fashion is the focus is different. The products are perhaps a little bit more complex at times because you're talking about investment products and insurance products. And I'm not saying, Standard Bank has those things, but for the most part, at Sanlam, that's a big focus for us. And so that the nature of the work is a little bit different. The problems that I've found, at least if I compare it to and retrospectively having been in an everyday banking space, it's different. So even if you think that you're going to a financial institution, they're not all the same. Or if you're going to a retail business, they're not all the same. And they each have their own challenges and different problems to solve. So I think it's good to scope out the business that you're joining as a designer, because ultimately it's about the problems that we solve. And, someone once told me long ago, a designer will stay if they have interesting problems to solve. And I think as a designer, you also have to ask, well, what would be interesting problems to solve for me?
Awesome.
Right, should I throw another one up?
I'm gonna pick. I would like to answer Matt in a bit, but can we answer Hilde Cronje's? How often have you picked up on a portfolio?
Oh, yeah, that's a great one. Where the work was not created by that individual. Very topical with everything that's going on in AI at the moment. Yeah, who wants to have a stab at that?
Okay, I will.
Go to
It has happened. It has happened. And it's not great. I'm pleased to say that it hasn't happened that often. But unfortunately, it has happened. And the thing I would caution anyone out there who is doing that is, first of all, like, just do your own work. You're not going to get hired. You're not going to be able to do your job if you don't know how to design, so don't steal someone else's stuff. But that said, if you're a lead and you're showing work that like your team has done, or you were part of a team working with someone and you're sharing the same work, just be very open about saying, this is the thing, okay, I maybe didn't do this exact design, I did the one before it, but this is where we ended up. Just be open and honest about that stuff. Because like we've said, it's around understanding your thinking about it and your understanding of the problem that you're trying to solve. It's not necessarily about the pixel perfect execution of that one screen grab in your portfolio, right? But yeah, it's the industry is not that big, and a lot of us know each other, so you're gonna get caught out. It's really actually that simple. Just don't do it. Just don't.
I've got a quick question to add to that, because that came up in an earlier discussion we had this year where Skulk, I can't even remember what the title of it was. But it is for people quite hard to know how to present shared work. So you were one of a person working on a team. So how do they talk about it, and how do they portray their work? Because I think some people's ethics kick in, and that's why the question comes up. It's like, I'm showing this work as work that I've done, but I know that I haven't contributed everything to it. I was just part of a team. And then sort of a second part to it is that bothers people, or that they don't know how to address, is the work that is stuck behind an NDA. And they're not allowed to show it, or they're not allowed to talk about it. And then I feel like, but if I can't show that, then what do I show?
Can I take a stab? Because what we find important is not the end product, but the how. How did you get to that end product? And a portfolio can show you the screens, it can show you the amazing designs. But if you're unable to talk to how did you get to that design, and what your contribution was, and what did you learn from it so that you won't make the same mistakes again, is what will make or break the interview and the criteria for being successful or not. And often I find when we go through these portfolio reviews and when people present it, I'm not looking at the end. I'm looking at the process that you've taken to get to your designs. I'm looking at, are you empathizing with the client? Are you bringing that feedback back into your design? How have you changed the design? So it's all about the process and the how, rather than the final end product, which you may not even be able to show. And we've had examples where, based on NDAs, they weren't able to show, but they explained and drew out the picture of how they went through the process. That is critical.
From my side as well, like because I obviously I try and encourage my students to do collaborative work, but it's hard in an academic setting because like it's just academia is so set in you have an individual that gets a mark, and that mark is completely not influenced by anything external that anyone else did and whatever. But what I often find on the other side when I'm at the hiring table hiring people is to me those are really where valuable conversations, like when you did work with someone else on a project, what was that dynamic like? How did you guys work? Like like I almost feel like this, like having this space where you need to kind of unpack that is actually very fertile ground for actually showing your competency, much more than like here's a nice dribble screenshot that has like purple buttons and here. And I think this is maybe a good segue into. Let me maybe pull this one up about and Tracy, I think you touched on this one very, very quickly, which is, and this is a big one. Like, and I think I've been holding this one off because like this is a tough one. Is how important are portfolios? And maybe to add a bit more nuance to that, not only how important are portfolios, but what are the type of artifacts in portfolios that are of value? How valuable is it to have like an entire click-through prototype where it's effectively the entire app built in something like Figma? What was the other one? I can't remember now. Or like
Framer.
Is it? No, like what was the one that everyone used when like you had separate software
Envision.
for like, Envision,
Sketch.
yeah, Envision, yeah. I looked at Envision Studio once, and like, okay, yeah. I don't know, like Envision just went from like being one of the big ones to just completely falling by the wayside. And like, would you rather put effort into that, or is it not only fine to just have like some written paragraphs in terms of how the process went, what type of decisions were made, what went well, what didn't go that well, or might that even actually be better than just like a fully click-through prototype? I'm curious, like the role that you guys feel portfolios play, and also what specific artifacts are helpful in a portfolio and what is maybe not that helpful. And Jax, this is maybe something you can also maybe start with. I was hoping you'd give a bit more like wisdom here.
So for me, I think that there are, and I'm happy that this question is coming up because I think that the portfolio really is, I think Tracy said it perfectly. We're looking for data points. So people said it a lot in the beginning, which is a fit. And a lot of the time people fit culture fit, whereas most of us hire for culture add because we like diverse teams. But I think if we listen to what Meena said, it takes sometimes 8 to 9 months to hire someone. That's a huge cost on a company. So the hiring manager really, really, really wants to hire someone that will be happy in their team for a long time. So portfolio is important for everyone, just to show, oh, I can see you've done this before. So I wouldn't put too much emphasis on that. And then Skulk, just from my perspective, again, it depends on what flavor of designer you are. If you're a UX writer, you still need to show a portfolio of evidence, which is how did you write? Did you write in the design system, etc. Versus a service designer, which would have a different skill set from a systems thinking perspective as well. So I think I just want to emphasize that it's not just UI design that we're talking about, not just product design. And super senior designers like Marcel, and like when I go for interviews as well, I still have a portfolio, but my portfolio is more about design operations or how I help teams. So it's still showing evidence of something. So I just want to like debunk that thing about a portfolio. Portfolio is not a specific thing. It's to show evidence of your work. But yeah, maybe for me, it's just one of 3 or big things that I look at: how you talk through your work and how you talk through how you work with other people in a team. And how honest you are about that is really important to me, because I can promise you that if we start asking questions about your research methodology, if someone else did it, we pick up on that. So to answer what Hilda was saying earlier is, I've said it once or twice where verbatim, like someone took someone else's design into their portfolio, but I've seen it way, way, way more often where people would go, and then I did this. And I'm like, okay, cool. Which methodology did you use? And they'd be like, oh, and then it turns out there's someone else did the research. So don't be that guy. Like, just say who did what in the team. anyway, that's my thoughts.
Yeah, that's
I agree
great.
with you,
Yeah.
Jax. I think it depends on what the designer is you're looking at. There's many different flavors, and if you really on the UI end, it's obviously going to have more of the bright and shiny things. But then again, there's thinking behind it. You should know how to apply brand, and how does brand get articulated in the UI space. And it's an art form, it's a craft in itself. And further upstream, if you in the service design or design research space, the artifacts will look different and they might not be as shiny, but they need to speak to what you solved. And I like I do like a portfolio that has a little bit of personality, that has a little bit of the person in there. And it needn't be a flashy thing. It might just be, the way you talk to the problem. And to that point, I think if you can articulately speak to the problem and what was solved, or articulately and in simple terms, just refer to and unpack the use case, that already says a lot. So a little bit of personality doesn't hurt, and being able to articulate the problem space now you solve for it definitely helps. And then it's all about the artifacts and what you applied for whatever you were tending to. I find it very interesting to interrogate something like a service design blueprint or user journey, because it really, once you start digging into it, you can start to tell if someone used a generic template, or it's just fluff, or there's some really interesting insights in there. Same with the user flow. And yeah, same with someone that's tended to a design system and unpacked a set of components. That's a big part of what we're tending to at the moment for Sanlam. And there are people that are super passionate about that and just want to do design systems. And so, yeah, it really depends on who you're speaking to and what the role is that you're looking at, and how that portfolio will pan out or look like.
Yeah, like I also just wanted, like, I try really hard to not like kind of take over the entire conversation. I just have so many questions, just because like I'm dealing so much with students. So obviously, you guys are kind of at the point where they're aiming to eventually end up once they graduate. But yeah, like this is for me, like it's a big thing, like getting people to stop thinking about visual artifacts. And I'm also curious what your thoughts are. Have you gotten portfolios or applications or whatever where they're just like throwing stuff at you? It's like, okay, here's a site I designed, here is 7,000 wireframes, 500 mock-ups of every possible screen that the app can be in. Yeah, like don't even get me started. But like I'm curious what your thoughts are on that. How harmful is that really? Like,
you have
is
to
it
pick your use cases, and you have to curate your portfolio carefully.
Yeah.
And again, that speaks to you knowing your work and knowing what's important to surface and what not. Because yes, there are many cases where there's stuff that it's not relevant, or it's just fluff, or you can see it's just been thrown together or not really considered in terms of how the different use cases hang together and tells a coherent story about you and what you're about and what you like to solve and so on.
It's quite interesting. Sorry, Tracy. It's not about the quantity, but it's about the quality.
Yeah.
And you can have a person that comes in with 50 different, and we've literally had examples of individuals coming with multiple examples of use cases. But when you dig and interrogate the detail, they're unable to go into the detail. And that's when it's a red flag. So for me, quality over quantity is very important. I'll hand over to you, Tracy.
Totally agree with that. And I think the thing is also, we don't have all the time in the world, to be honest, to sit and look through hundreds of pictures. You know, like I once had something sent to me where it was like a link to a Google Drive with a, you know, with a little password, and it was like it could have been their whole server, and I was like, what am I going to do with this? You know, like, where do I go first? So exactly what everyone's saying, it needs to have quality. It needs to, how are you trying to show me that you have the skill and capability and you know how to do this? You don't need to have 500 things to do that. You could maybe only have 2, and that's okay, because if they're a good starting point for me to understand how you think about stuff and how you have taken the skills you've learned, that's fine. That's awesome. I'd rather have a slimmed down, beautiful thing than 50 different versions and a full prototype click through, which I promise you, I'm actually not going to look at it. I don't have that much time to do that.
No, that's great. Thanks. And yeah, it's like, I've actually been curious because this is something I've been wondering about. Have any of you ever received like video like applications, like where someone's like, hey, this is my name, this is kind of like my portfolio, this is what I did, this is why I did it, and so forth? Is that something that has ever come up?
Not specifically like that for me. We did do once at the bank, we did a sort of grad intake thing where we actually got them all to do intro videos and a whole lot of stuff online, and then we asked specific questions. And so as a panel of interviewees, we got to see these little snippets from each person. But the only other time I've had sort of video stuff sent to me was back in the day when I was in agency, but then we were actually looking for multimedia designers, and so then you expect them to be bringing you multimedia, right? But it's an interesting question, because these days so much more is videoed, right? Is that something that we should start looking to see? A beautifully curated 5-minute clip of my history and awesomeness as a designer? I don't know. I'd be interested.
We've tried that. It does work.
Have you?
Yeah, there's some really cool software out there that you can use, and what you do is you can set up the interview beforehand, so you can kind of customize the experience for the person and say, okay, well, once you've asked a question, you can give them 20 seconds to think about it, and on their interfaces they'll see themselves on the video, and the question will pop up on the screen. I don't think it's not. I think it's for shortlisting and maybe like your speed dating type scenario. It's not. It's a means to an end to get a really long list very short with the least amount of manpower. So it works if you use it for that. But at some point you got to take the software out of it and meet the person. But it does work. There are some really like elegant solutions out there, and it is a time saver.
We're going to start getting TikTok videos soon, guys.
Yeah, we're going to explore it.
I also think like that time thing is very important. So if you're hiring asynchronously, great. But don't send like a 30-minute video if I'm still like looking at 100 portfolios, because we're not going to watch it. So really I always talk about the UX of UX. So when you're looking for a job, looking at like, did I name my CV correctly? Did I make it easy for the hiring manager to get from my CV to my portfolio? Those things really matter. So like look at the basics on getting the information to the person as quickly as possible. For me, I also, especially with, I would say, individual contribution up until senior designers, I care more about how they present the work or how they do the work. I don't care about how they present themselves that much. So I also want to say, if you're a UI designer and your CV is only visual, you are making it hard for me to see how you write, how you approach hierarchy in design. So also think about like those different elements that you need as a designer when you share stuff, and just try and make it easy for whoever's dealing with it, and that will usually help you win.
Yeah, so I was definitely thinking more in line of something like Loom. I think we've had a lot of great success with Loom, and what's great about Loom is the free plan has a 5 minute limit, which is I kind of see as a feature, not a bug. Yeah, so like I've actually had a lot of success where asking people to just share their screen and talk through a design and so forth. But yeah. Um, there's a ton of other questions here. Then there's another one about. I kind of like this idea. There's a like question about like including kind of almost like a where I failed section in your CV, or speaking about where things didn't go to plan, or where things can be further improved, or learnings that you only realized after doing the project and so forth. Yeah. Is that something that would add value?
Something Michelle brought up, I think Helene was referring to what Michelle mentioned, and that she thought that
Okay.
was
For sure.
fascinating. So it really
I,
resonated with
yeah.
her. Go, Michelle.
Yeah, no, I mean that's definitely something I don't see it often. I mean, it's not something you see often actually. It's quite refreshing when someone said, "Oh, you know, we really, you know, failed here, or this is a, you know, this didn't end up pretty, but here's what we learned, and we pivoted, or we iterated, and you know, ultimately that's what we got to." I
It's
wanted
actually.
to,
Oh,
sorry,
go ahead, Marcel.
no, all good. I wanted to digress.
I was gonna say that when I don't see it in the portfolio of evidence, I normally ask. When they take you through a use case, I always ask, what was your key learning? And how did you use that in your next project? Because that also gives you insight into how the person is accepting of what didn't go right, and how they're actually changing for the future. Now you can digress.
There was actually one sculpt that I wanted to talk about, and this is a question around how can I tailor my portfolio so the recruiter can understand it. So I think that's an important point. I mean, even now, you know, I think at any stage of your career, you should tailor your portfolio and your CV to the job that you're going for. And it doesn't mean, you know, lying or anything. You should massage it so that you're highlighting the things that they're looking for. If you're going for a UX role and you've been doing UX for a while, but maybe you're going for one in a particular industry, or you know, there's certain things that they're looking for, then make sure that your portfolio reflects that. For the most part, and back to our previous point, it helps to keep things simple, and codify things, or use some methodology to help the recruiter and the person looking at it pick things up fairly easily. So use things like tags or keywords to tag a use case or tag a portfolio piece with something like financial, or retail, for instance, or journey work, or so that, you know, at a glance you can kind of see, you know, what's included in here, and then you can deep dive.
Sorry, I've got a question that I want to add onto that, if I can. Just your opinion on the old cover letter. Because I feel really sometimes that the cover letter is the gap filler. It is that little bit of opportunity that you have to tell a story, and to bring a little bit of context to what is on your CV or portfolio. And it's also an opportunity to speak to, if you've read the skills required to do a certain or to apply for a certain position, but you lack one or two of 6 key skills that they have mentioned. It's an opportunity to address that. And to highlight what you bring to the table. So I highly value a cover letter. I just wanted to know your opinion on the cover letter.
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know how everybody else's experience, but you don't encounter it a lot. Again, You don't encounter a cover letter a lot, but it also shows you if someone's thought about and read about and done the research around your business, and where they think they may be able to add value.
It tells you that they're trying to make the right match and that they're actually thinking about it, which is what you also want, right? Because you want to employ somebody and you want to have longevity in it. So the cover letter is that thing for me. Whereas if people, but I think people see it as archaic. I think people just see it as this, like it's a cover letter is a
feels
almost like
old school.
we need a new word for it then, because we invent names for stuff every day, don't we? So I think we must just reinvent the cover letter. To not make it sound so terrible, because it's actually it's an opportunity to say something, and if you're not doing it, you're missing an opportunity. That's how I feel about it. Just my opinion.
Scott, before we move on,
yes,
just before we move, and I think that there was a very particular point that Matt wanted help on, which is how do I tailor my portfolio so that the recruiter can understand it and the hiring manager can find it detailed enough? And for me, that's like a really important question that you're asking, but I also think it's very helpful to everyone else. Hi, Taz. So here it's basically, I would recommend, and I have to ask the other people on the panel, that you actually just prioritize it. Think about it like when you design something, who's your primary audience? Your hiring manager, the person who's going to decide whether you get the job or not. So I recommend that you focus on that. And recruiters, if they don't pay enough attention to what should be happening in the field, hopefully they also kind of just get worked out, because like anything else, the better your job, the more people like want to work with you. So I would say, Matt, focus on the hiring manager, and hopefully, you know, the recruiter also goes, oh, this is awesome. I don't know if Tracy, you wanted to add anything to that?
Yeah, I think I agree with that. It would be interesting to have a recruiter's view in on this, but I suspect that they're only looking at the CV. And then when we, as the hiring manager, are asking to see the portfolio, they're going to get it and say, here's the thing, and they're handing it over. I mean, I don't know that they're even looking at it. I might be wrong, but that's my experience of it. So I would definitely say that tailoring the portfolio should be to the hiring manager, to the job that you're looking for, not so much the recruiter.
And then Skulk, I think Tasman's question about red flags is a good one to end off with.
Yeah, there was can I maybe just pop a quick one in here? There was a question around just like a couple that were speaking about, let me just bring one of them up here. That was speaking about like, are there any like automated tooling that filters CVs and things out? I can imagine, you know, it's not necessarily that big of a problem that like I might face, or maybe, no offense to IO, but I assume IO isn't operating at the level that, for example, Sanlam is operating when they advertise a position. So I'm curious, like whether there's any like kind of tooling that you guys use that do some type of automated filtering or so forth, or is it all literally just a human sitting going through every single email?
No, we certainly don't have any tools, such fancy tools on our side. It's
you just have interns.
We have HR and recruiter people.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So no one's using any automated software or anything. Okay, that's
people
good
have.
to hear.
It seems like a fear that people have because they are scared they're not going to make it through the AI. So people have asked me that in the past. We don't use it. I can also see where maybe there is a use case for it, but certainly it would be silly to use it in design at this point in time.
Yeah. And I guess that would just be like super low-hanging fruit, like filtering out obscenities and profanities.
Well, yeah, I mean, I sometimes open a job and then I get a cashier applying for a job. So, I mean, you can rip those things out with a tool, but yeah, not at this point in time.
And I
Yeah.
think a lot of companies in SA doesn't get the same amount of CVs that require the filtering that the FANG companies get.
Yeah.
So I know that there's a lot of talk about it in LinkedIn, but I think it's used a lot less frequently. Where I do know that
Yeah.
it does get used is in high-tech startups, where
Yeah.
people who come from a tech background sees tech to be a good solution. In my experience, I've seen that experienced design leaders like the panel know that using those shortcuts doesn't lets good candidates go. So we will see how that ends up over the next few years. Okay, 5
Yeah.
minutes, Skulk. What's the last question?
As requested, Tasman, here we go. Okay, you want me to read it? Cool. So, busy looking for a job. I've had some interesting interviewing experience in my career. What are red flags that designers should look for during the interview process? Yeah, I've definitely been to an interview where people had toothbrushes on their desks, and I was like, I don't think I want to work here. Like, yeah, I want to go home. But yeah, I'm curious whether any of you guys maybe had experiences where you saw red flags when you applied for something.
I'll go first while everyone else thinks. 'Cause I just remembered I once went for an interview, and 5 minutes in, even though I did like a prepared interview, I spent a lot on my first interview, and 5 minutes in, the hiring manager started arguing with the other head of design. And then they argued with each other for the next 10 minutes. And when one of the BAs on the team asked me how long it takes me to finish a design, and I was like, well, it depends on the research. And she was like, no, but I'll tell you what you need to design. And I was like, yeah, okay, bye guys. So for me, those are
Amazing.
2 red flags. If they argue with each other, I don't want to work there. And if someone doesn't see the value of research, I'm definitely not in.
I guess from my side, I'll add on, Jax, is the design maturity at the organization. And it comes out in the questions that's been asked. And just for me, it's also the culture fit. Is would I be able to work in an environment that doesn't see design as I'd like it to be seen and heard? For me, that's a huge red flag. And that's when I know that this company is not taking design seriously. But if it's for a position where I can influence and have a say and bring the voice of client and voice of design to the table, then I'd jump for that. So it's at what level you are at and at what level the organization is at from a design perspective. Thanks.
Cool.
I
No
think
other
from my
war
side,
stories.
I think if you start, and I think it's important to ask questions to the people interviewing you about their business and what challenges they have. And just as a designer, you're supposed to, and I think you're supposed to be transparent about your challenges and shortfalls and maybe some gaps in your skill set. The organization should also be transparent and honest about it. And what's for me a flag sometimes is how people respond to or talk to those challenges, and sometimes they can dismiss it or say that it's someone else's fault, or that they stuck in a situation and they just need someone to help because it's the stakeholders or business is very difficult. It's all about how people talk to and describe the challenges. All organizations have challenges. All organizations are battling to bring complexity to the table and make sense of it, and in cross collaborative teams solve together. So it's very indicative of culture when people within an organization and people that are interviewing you, yeah, we are family. That's a no-no apparently. Although when that's not something to be said nowadays. But when I joined Fjord, that's what was said. It was almost a cult. It was like, we are family. And I was like, yeah, I drank the Kool-Aid, and it was amazing. But what happened actually in retrospect is that there was that family was so closely knit, and I'm talking about organizational, Fjord as a design agency was so closely knit and so tight and so had such strong bonds that fitting into a larger kind of consultancy like Accenture proved to be challenging, and letting go of some of that proved to be challenging. So if people hold on to beliefs very strongly, maybe too strongly, or that they speak within the context of their organization, you just have to listen to the words and think about how they speak to the challenges they are experiencing, and whether they have a healthy relationship themselves to the organization and in solving for whatever's coming their way.
Yeah, that's maybe a good place to end it off.
I think so too. I just want to thank everyone who joined today. I thought it was very helpful. I hope everyone who was listening also found it useful. Everyone who spoke today are really nice and friendly people, so I'm sure if you reach out to them for some help and advice, they might actually talk to you. They're also busy. And then from my side, just really thank you for everyone. Skulk, thanks for jumping in. Always really amazing to hear your perspective. I actually think we should have a session later this year where we just talk about like industry and studying, and like see how we can meet somewhere in the middle. Liesl, thanks so much as always for helping me organize everything, and of course everyone behind the scenes, Dean and Joshua, really appreciate it. And then I'll just give everyone a quick chance to just say goodbye. I'll start with Marcel.
Bye, everybody. Thank you so much. It was an awesome conversation. Thanks for everybody that organized it. Thanks, Jax, for the invite, and good to see some familiar faces.
Amazing. Tracy?
Yeah, thanks very much for having me. It's been a very interesting conversation. I've enjoyed it, and I do hope that a whole lot of other people have been inspired and they're going to go off and find great jobs now. But thanks very much for the time. It was great.
Thank you so much, Jax and Skulk and Liesl, for inviting us to this. It's been very insightful, and I hope we've shared a lot of learnings for everyone to take forward. Thanks.
Amazing. Anything else from Liesl? Skulk?
No, I just want to say every time we do a panel discussion, I end up with a book of topics for next for next discussion. It was really insightful, and it was really amazing to hear your perspective on it. And also for me, the smaller versus the larger organization, not that different, to be honest. Yeah, thank you so much, Jax, Skulk, everyone, for this. It was amazing.
Cool.
And
Thanks
you get
so
to
much,
say the
guys.
last word, Skulk.
Me? Oh, okay, awesome. Yeah. If you like this and you want more of this, go to zapd.co.za. South African product design. Yeah, we have a Slack workspace. There's links to lots of these type of things, and hopefully we'll catch you again soon. All right, everyone, have a great Monday and chat again soon. Bye-bye.
Awesome. Thanks,
Wait.
everyone.